because I have this sort of like this sort of dream to create a children's books, actually. A children's book that celebrates queer and trans Native peoples and their stories. And as you probably have seen on my blog, there are like little snippets of poetry, little snippets of stories. And I've been trying to figure out ways to sort of combine my academic career and the creativity that I love doing. I mean, for example, recently I just wrote, I did write a story, but I also made an audio of it in which the story is about decolonization. And what it particularly is, it's about these two characters, a grandma and a granddaughter. And the granddaughter is sort of struggling with trying to understand what decolonization means. And it gets to that tension that I think a lot of people my age and younger, because like we are, decolonization has become a sort of metaphor. Unfortunately, it's become like a very trendy word to use. But when you really get to the crux of it, you start to see that there's these tensions, there's these sort of conflicts that people are like, wait, what exactly does this mean for me then? And the story sort of touches upon that because this granddaughter just learned this word in college and doesn't know what it means. And she thought she would ask her grandmother. But then the grandma's like, I don't know what that word is. And then as the story continues, the granddaughter realized, she was like, you know, even though my grandma may not know the word, she's doing the work of it already. And so I love that type of thing of like where I'm using these very complex concepts that are gatekeep from us and sharing them with the world in very like accessible, creative ways. So I do plan on getting more creative. I'm just trying to get this PhD first. And thank you for your question, Rose.
So we had a question in the chat box from Laritza Garcia, who wrote, "Hi, my name is Laritza, and my question is, what would you say to someone that is having trouble coming out in a very religious household?"
The first thing I would say is, of course, as many people would probably tell you, there's no rush, you know, and I know that it really hurts to have to hide such a, a meaningful and important part of yourself. But, you know, it's important to keep faith that if the time is right, it should make itself apparent to you, you know, and to just go with your gut, and just, you know, keep, I guess I don't know all the factors in your situation specifically, but it's just, there's something to keep in mind, you know, that you're not any less valid, of course, by the way, by not being out to your family. Uh, it, all, you know, we see you and everyone sees you for who you really are, and everyone that cares for you. So I just want you to know that as well.
Yes, I agree with Sewa that please know that the people here in particularly see you and adore you and want to support you. And so something I did not mention actually, and I do not like talking about this at all. It makes me feel gross a little bit, but my family is actually practicing Mormons. So they're very active members in the Latter-day Saints Church. And the reason why I was so afraid to share my truth with my mother is because I wasn't sure how she felt. And when I say active members, let me just say that I have several uncles who have went on missions with the Latter-day Saint Church. I have several aunts and uncles who were part of a program where they lived with a Mormon family. And even to this day, my grandmother continues to go to the church. And something that I always think about, and my mom constantly denies this, and maybe I made it up in my memory, I'm not exactly sure. But I do remember at one point my grandmother telling my mom that how she's afraid. She said, you know that your child is going to hell if they continue to practice any sort of homosexual behavior. And that, overhearing that just made me feel just really, really sad. And I love my grandmother. I mean, I constantly visit her. I am one of like, out of, I would say 20 or so of her grandchildren, I am one of three that visit her. It's my sister and one of my cousins and I. And we visit her. I mean, I'm about to go visit her this weekend, actually. But having that type of religious upbringing can really, I think, stir a lot of like hate and self-doubt about yourself. And one thing that I always emphasize to people, and this may be a bit controversial to a lot of folks, because people want you to celebrate your truth when you're ready, and that like you know who you are. And I agree, you know who you are. I also, as someone who is queer, as someone who is trans, and as someone who is Native, am very much aware of our precarity, of the moment that we do something that is out of line for society, death is a possibility. And what I tell people is, I was like, share when you are safe. I want you to be safe. I want you to thrive, and I want you to survive. And not many people feel safe in their homes, and that is very upsetting. But I also want you to like be able to live your truth when you're surrounded by people who love you, who support you, and who will celebrate you every single day. And if they don't, hide your light just a little until you're ready to shine.
Thank you, Charlie. We have another question. This is from Simcha. They're asking, how can I help my school, which has only recently begun publicly supporting its queer student body, to understand the vastness of queerness and not exclude groups in their allyship?
I have something to say about this, and I think it's extremely important in any queer space. And that's to, we shouldn't police people and their queerness or their identity in any capacity, but especially, you know, if I'm trying to understand the question fully, you're saying like understanding the complexity of queerness in general. So not just for Indigenous people, but, that's where I think a lot of the problems arise when we start to like ask these questions like, well, like, because my identities, a lot of them kind of contradict one another in my head, at least, because I'm trans feminine. I call myself like the closest colonial term I could think of, or settler term, is demi woman, and a lesbian as well. And I present masculinely a lot of the times, you know, and it varies. But, a lot of people, a lot of the times will, if they have a perception of what an identity should be in their head. And that's where the problems arise, when they start to say, well, why are you doing this if you identify like this? Why are you dressing like that if you identify like that? Or why are you with this person if this is your orientation? I see this problem come up with a lot with people that are non-binary in relationships. There's all sorts of discourse about, you know, sexuality in relationship to non-binary people. And I think that's where the issues come from. So if we just kind of take it easy and not feel the need to police people's identities, their appearance, their expression, their, how they choose to love people, or who they choose to love, I think that solves a lot of the issues. So, you just need to check in with yourself and check in with the people. Like, if there's a problem with somebody or something, like, are we perpetuating that kind of settler violence of kind of saying what something should be? Because also a lot of the standards for what is queer, trans, etc., is these things didn't exist necessarily prior to colonization. Like, these were invented by a colonial system of gender and sexuality. So I think if we pay more attention to that sort of deal, that can fix a lot of the issues that we have with one another in that way. So
Thank you, Sewa. I think that's a beautiful summary. And I think like one way folks can do that is really, I mean, I don't know what is it about millennials, Gen X, and older folks' aversion of social media, but social media is, I think, one of the ways that that vastness is represented. And you can really sort of see the complexity that Sarah was talking about by simply following just a few accounts. And even the most popular LGBTQ content creators, don't follow the white ones. But thinking of like folks that come to my mind, for example, are Alok. I think it's Alok Manon. I think that's her last name. Oh my goodness. I just know their first name, Alok. And then Pink Man Ray. I think it's Pink Man Ray. Blair Amani. Like, these are people who will show you to the world of like how vast queerness is. And a lot of them provide educational content on how to be better allies. And allyship is a verb, by the way. It's not a passive sense.
Thank you, Sewa and Charlie. So this next question is going to be a little bit heavy, so a little bit of a content warning. But as we know, across the United States and in Canada, as well as many other colonial nations such as Guatemala and Brazil, that missing murdered Indigenous women is a rising issue that is often not recognized or even discussed. And this question is, how can people who are supporting or raising awareness regarding missing and murdered Indigenous women be more inclusive to recognize the LGBTQ women, femme presenting Indigenous people who are also going missing during these times? Sorry, a little bit of a heavy loaded question, but I thought it'd be important. I also wanted to bring up real quick that October marks Domestic Violence Awareness Month. We do have a resource to the Student Advocacy Center in our link tree if you want to learn more. Thank you.
Greg, can you put that question in the chat box, please?
Yes, so sorry, it was a little bit low.
You are fine. Thank you. I can sort of try to tackle this. I think, so, oh my gosh, how to frame this? So missing and murdered Indigenous women is a pressing issue that sort of is a movement to demand violence against Native women. And and to be completely honest, I am not mad that I'm not included when it comes to being someone who is a trans femme. I am not mad about it. And if I was, and the reason why I say that is because I really do think missing and murdered Indigenous women, its origins make sense. It was an organized movement to talk about the way that violence against Native women are so prevalent and how it happens to them. Now, what I have an issue with is when trans women are not included. And that is the trans misogyny of that movement. And that makes a lot of sense because a lot of cis Native women, a lot of cis Native men don't see trans Native women as women. And that is the problem with that movement. And I have no idea how that's going to be addressed because a lot of these wonderful, problematic leaders of this movement don't have the cognitive capacity to fully comprehend what womanhood is outside the context of colonial understandings of gender and sexuality. And that is on them, and they need to do that work. because I am, and this is maybe a bit controversial, I am tired of trying to ask for a place at the table. I am tired of demanding that I be included. And something that my content has evolved, I was like, you know what? I'm going to make my own table, and I'm going to invite as many people who want to be at this table as we try to be inclusive, as we try to be critical, as we try to sort of challenge settler colonialism and work towards a future where we are all liberated. And, you know, maybe those leaders of that movement will join, but they have to like get over their transmisogyny. They have to address it. They have to really work through it on their own. Because like, although my content is educational, I also have a limit. And I really think that people need to start doing their own work of really undoing the type of violence that they have inherited and the type of violence that they are recycling. Because, and I'm going to be completely honest here, the ancestors know when you are being violent and when you are not in line with them, and they will send things your way. As someone who has been tripped multiple times, I can tell you that they will do something if you are not doing the right work and if you use them. And so for missing and murdered Indigenous women, they need to address their transmisogyny on their own time. And for our community, we need to start organizing with people who want to build and collaborate together. Because I really think at this point, it's crucial.
I don't really have much to add because I think Charlie laid everything out perfectly. I mean, yeah, I think that that idea of self-reliance, you know, like Charlie said, making our own table, I think that is critical in assisting this issue because, I mean, yeah, there's only so much you can do to educate people that are willfully ignorant. And at a certain point, we need to be the people that look out for each other. And that's, I try to practice that as much as possible. You know, it's just, you know, really sometimes all we have is each other. And so that at least making a space for trans people and two-spirit people, giving them resources, you know, funding them. I mean, there's so many things that allies can do to help trans feminine people, trans women, and two-spirit people. So, I mean, yeah, I think that's pretty much it. Charlie, thank you so much for saying what you had to say.
Thank you so much to both of you. I understand it's a very heavy topic for many of us in our communities. But I wanted to remind everyone again that October marks Domestic Violence Awareness Month. In our Linktree Central, we have a link to the Student Advocacy Center here at San Antonio College. There they provide resources for counseling, as well as other resources. If any student needs someone to reach out to, the San Antonio College community has those resources available, as well as Pride Center San Antonio, whose link I also provided. To kind of break up the, you know, sorry, the from that tense question, we have a listener write in from Alex, who's asking, where can they learn more about Indigenous queer identities as a non-Indigenous person? I think that was kind of addressed earlier before, but are there specific resources or specific ways that you would prefer that someone outside of the Indigenous queer community learn more about our identities?
So, and I say this with a lot of love, why do you want to know? And I think that's a question that I think a lot of people need to really ask themselves. Why do you want to know this specific knowledge from this specific community? And what are you going to do with it? Because, and I think this is another interesting part of my content as on TikTok and Instagram. I rarely share cultural knowledge from my community. And when I do share it, it's with other Dene, it's with other queer and trans Dene. And I will be in community with them and share that knowledge. But I also don't share it with non-Dene. I mean, like, what I've shared here is like the boundary that I've set. I'm not going to go in complete details. And I think it's wonderful that people are curious and want to know more. But I think you need to ask yourself, why do you want to learn more? And what are you going to do with that knowledge? Because that type of knowledge within our communities is quite powerful and is very much a gift. And we don't willingly share it because we had to protect it. Because for so long, these empires did not let us live, would not let us live our traditions, would not let us practice them. And in only recent, like literally, I would say less than 50 years, when the Indian Religious Act was passed, that's when we were finally allowed to practice these ceremonies openly. And so we're very protective of this type of knowledge. And if you do want to learn more, I really think that then you need to start building meaningful relationships with the Indigenous peoples, both in your circle, in your community, and in the region of where you are. And I think that's the best way to really do it.
Could you repeat the question, Greg, or put it in the chat?
Yes. It was a listener write-in that was asking, how can a non-Indigenous person learn more about Indigenous LGBTQIA2S+ identities, such as accessing certain resources that you would recommend, etc.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I agree with what Charlie's saying, and I think an important part of that is, you know, a lot of Indigenous culture and wisdom. Um, I was talking about this with my Ioeme two-spirit friends just yesterday, actually, because one of them had, you know, it's sort of a similar situation where information is just kind of taken, and it's sad because it's very much, you know, there's people willing to exploit knowledge and information that is given freely because for us there's nothing to gain other than our communities being more informed and more harmonious. And so yeah, it's just, yeah, there's a sensitivity that needs to be had when dealing with this sort of thing where you want to know more. And yeah, it's a matter of, you know, I guess, yeah, knowing boundaries, understanding them, respecting them. There's nothing, I think, necessarily super wrong with the desire to know more. It's just a matter of how you go about it and building those relationships, like Charlie was saying. I mean, because you genuinely need to care about these people, and that's a huge part of it, definitely. I didn't have a ton to add necessarily, but yeah.
We have another question. How do you feel about two-spirit identities being included under the umbrella acronym LGBTQIA2S+?
I know that there's a lot of conflicting views about this particular issue. I'm not sure where I stand, honestly. I mean, but I do understand the argument, you know, essentially that we don't subscribe to these labels necessarily in the same way that someone of a settler mindset might, or a non-Indigenous mindset, you know, might. Um, and so I understand the desire to want to separate like two-spirit community from LGBTQ plus community. But at the same time, you know, it's a very complicated thing, I feel like, because it is nice to see these gestures of inclusivity of Indigenous people, but there's just sort of a cultural understanding, a cultural difference that comes into play that makes it a bit more complex in that way. So, I mean, it might not be as helpful for me to offer a neutral response, but, you know, Charlie, what do you have to say on the subject?
I am actually not going to respond because I am not two-spirit, my feelings about it should not matter. So I think that type of question should be directed towards someone who is two-spirit, who is in the two-spirit community, and how they feel about it. And definitely there is actually a conflict too, as Sewa mentioned. And so I'm just like, you know, y'all can figure that out and let me know when you need my help or support.
Thank you, Sarah and Charlie. Our next question is also going to be a little bit of a heavy question, but sorry. How would both of you, what advice would you give, or any knowledge that you would give regarding LGBTQ Indigenous people and the HIV/AIDS epidemic that's still impacting our communities? This, for many who don't know, within Indigenous communities on reservations or rural communities don't have access to health resources. So I was just going to ask your thoughts on that. I'll also put this in the comment section.
Could you repeat the first half, please, Greg? Or whenever you put it in the chat.
Yes, I'll put it in the chat too, but basically your thoughts, advice, or comments regarding the HIV/AIDS epidemic that's infecting the LGBTQ community at large, and also specifically for Indigenous communities.
Yeah, of course. So I think, so one thing that I think people understand is that within many Native communities, we have our own health service units. They're called the Indian Health Service, which are sort of funded by the Secretary of Interior, by the Department of Interior, thus the United States. And it's not free healthcare, by the way. That's not what it is. It's actually a treaty obligation that the United States offered in exchange for lands and resources, and that many Native nations recognize the US as a sovereign nation. And so health access is actually a requirement. And so I think what really needs to be addressed, particularly about HIV, is really destigmatizing and trying to educate people about what HIV is, the type of resources that are available, the type of support that is there. And that's coming from someone who I had to do that work because like I had that fear, and a part of me still does. But I'm actually reading a book. Oh my gosh, what exactly is it called? But there's this book that's talking, and it's a translated book. It's translated from, I think, Portuguese or Spanish, because the book was published in Brazil. And the book is talking, it's about the lives of 3 different people, 2 of which, one of them is living with HIV and is non-detectable, and the other person was just diagnosed with HIV. And it's sort of like where I'm at right now, it's talking about their everyday lives, the different medication that's available to them. And one person, the person who was just recently diagnosed, is trying to like learn to destigmatize it because now they're living with it. And the third person is someone who was dating a person who is non-detectable. And the problem with them is that like they have a lot of stigma that they have to work through. And that's what you sort of get through the book. And as I'm listening to this book, I realized that particularly within the Navajo Nation, we hardly talk about HIV. I think people don't really think about it a lot. I mean, there's barely any conversations around STIs in general. And then there's very little education around safe and healthy sexual practices. And so to really, I think, to talk about HIV, you then have to really get into this program and build a sort of awareness around what it is and what it isn't. And a lot of that is going to take a lot of work. But then you also have to address the stigma too. And so building capacity to do that requires, I think, a multi-layer approach. I mean, I know particularly Navajo Nation, yes, it's going to require that. But I also think there's this importance to really get health professionals involved. And it's a bit difficult because like, you think being queer and Native is rare. Being queer, Native, and knowing about HIV is probably even rarer. And to the point of like being able to be a professional about it and talk about it in a very sort of like healthcare type of way. So, like I said, multi-layered approach.
I would have to agree with what Charlie said, of course. And I don't really feel as though I'm someone who's well versed enough. As someone who's never lived on a reservation, someone who's not familiar with the services available there. Well, I am somewhat familiar. I mean, and that's the thing is that I believe the Pasqua branch of our various tribes, they've started making a push to educate people. And according to my friends, who've lived there for a good deal of their lives, they said this is extremely new, extremely like very much boundary pushing. And it's just something I see the tides changing in terms of, awareness, education. And that gives me a lot of hope. But yeah, I don't necessarily think I can speak too much on it, but I do see the tides changing. And so that does make me happy to report. But yes, thank you for your question.
Thank you, Charlie and Sewa. Our next question is, and this one I prepped, so I'm sending it in. What are your thoughts on the colonial leaders in Canada and the United States prioritizing Two-Spirit as well as Indigenous persons' identities? This is in reference to a listener write-in sending in a link from Canada. This is specific to Justin Trudeau, the Prime Minister of Canada, but I believe it's also relevant here in the US. But earlier this month, the Prime Minister of Canada, Justin Trudeau, had announced that he wanted to prioritize Two-Spirit Indigenous persons in 2S LGBTQ plus identities for events, calendars and such, as well as pushing for missing and murdered Indigenous women advocacy. However, this has gotten a lot of backlash from the First Nations community in Canada, many saying that this is just virtue signaling that he won't actually do much. And this is also a feeling that many Indigenous communities in the US have as well. So just your thoughts on Trudeau and his advocacy.
So, I think something to say about Justin Trudeau and Biden is that they are afraid of the sort of collective voting power that Indigenous peoples within both of their empires are acquiring. I know particularly with the First Nations, they do not like Justin Trudeau, especially after he conveniently had travel plans on Orange Shirt Day last month. And particularly with Biden, he recently, I love saying this, but particularly the reason why he has Arizona as a swing state is because Indigenous peoples voted in large numbers for him. And recently he had a proclamation that we celebrate Indigenous peoples today, and yet did not really remove the other holiday for today. It's not National Coming Out Day, by the way. And I think these particular political leaders are, like I said, they're afraid. They're afraid of the collective voting power that we are acquiring and the fact that we are using their own systems of powers against them. And that there's really becoming a sort of movement here to address the violence that we have survived and continue to experience. Because, and I'm trying to remember who said this, but you can tell how a country is doing by how it treats its Indigenous peoples and its marginalized communities. And because the Canadian Empire and the US Empire are considered lovely first world countries, their popularity is going down globally as people learn more about Indigenous peoples and our issues. And so I think they're really trying to garner public support, because at this point, bad publicity is not helping them. So those are some thoughts that I have about politicians.
I would say, yeah. I definitely think that there is an aspect of it that is sort of just, you know, it's easy for a lot of settler states to make these sorts of statements. And this is kind of tying it to Mexico, but the president there, AMLO, has recently made a formal apology to our people in the homelands and supposedly promised, land back, water rights, all of these things. And, you know, it's easy to say things, and that's what I think Indigenous people are very familiar with. So I guess other than all the aspects of it that might be, performative, it's really just sort of a thing where it's like, I'll see it or I'll believe it when I see it, and that's just the way that we need to approach these things. Like I said, it's because based on historic precedent. So that's really all I have to say on that.
This next question is a listener writing directed to Sewa, but it's also open to Charlie, regarding detribalized individuals who are reconnecting to their roots as queer Indigenous people. I'll type this out as well. But just your advice on detribalized people who are reconnecting to their roots and feel nervous about using the terms two-spirit or feeling that very colonial influence of being queer and person of color. Sorry.
I was kind of hoping I'd get this question actually, but the two-spirit aspect of it definitely makes it a bit more complex. Well, the first thing I would say about reconnecting is that you definitely, and the metaphor I like to use is you need to go in slowly so as not to knock anything over. Because, I feel like a good majority of people are open to people who reconnect with their Indigenous heritage and their Indigenous communities. But it is extremely important not to kind of, to just take there's a long period of time that you just need to listen, and you need to be someone who's willing to learn, and you need to be there genuinely for the people, not the identity or the the connotations that come with that specific Indigenous identity, because and that's just in your best interest as well. To have community, you need to have connections with these people, and so it's a very difficult thing to do. But in being Two-Spirit definitely makes it more complicated. It's because there's this kind of wondering, like, well, is my community, how open are they, to queer people, to Two-Spirits? And when you're outside the culture, for so long, you don't know, and that can make it scary for sure. And so I think at that point, it's important to surround yourself with other Two-Spirit, other queer Indigenous people, and just kind of, I guess, feel it out from there, as that sounds. But just, and the truth is that, a lot of our societies are touched by colonialism, this sort of legacy of transphobia, queerphobia, homophobia. But I believe that Natives are, on average, very accepting people, because there's still enough of that pre-colonial memory of our existence there to kind of make people understand. At least that's what I found in my community. And that's the thing, I can't speak for all communities. And sometimes it's extremely unfortunate, like there's a lot of factors that go into it, but the main things I guess I wanted to convey are, yes, just going slowly, and then just sort of spend time learning from LGBTQ plus and Two-Spirit Native people as well. I was probably all over the place with that, but it's a very hard thing to parse, but yes, that's the advice I could offer.
And our final question to wrap up our Q&A section is, if either of you have any words of wisdom or advice for your younger self, what would it be? And I'll be sure to put this in the comment section as well.
I think the thing that I would want most to say to my younger self is that there is a place for you, and that, like I said previously, like my biggest epiphany is that you are special because of who you are, and because of who you'll be. And growing up, I was particularly effeminate, and that was very stigmatized by my family and community. It was just very difficult, and I tried to repress that for such a long time. And so there's like this pushback that I experienced for such a long time. And I wish that even if I had just found out a little sooner that it was okay to, or that I'm not, there's nothing wrong, that this is exactly how you were intended to be, because you have a role in this world that you were meant to fulfill. And that it's really just one of the best things that I've come to realize as of lately. And that's something I wish I could impart to my younger self who was struggling with these sorts of things. So yeah.
There's just something about this question that just like makes me want to cry just a little. Because I'm pretty sure we're going to be doing it at some point once time traveling gets figured out. But if I could tell my younger self, is that mistakes happen. You are not defined by the traumatic experiences you've had. Take risks have fun, and enjoy every single moment that you can, because there's going to be a time when you look back and you're not going to have any regret.
Thank you so much, Charlie and Sewa, for just being here today. Your words of wisdom are so inspiring. I'm saying this personally and hopefully on behalf of our viewers here that are here on Zoom and those who are viewing from the Fiesta Room and future viewers on YouTube. But again, thank you so much for both of you being here and sharing your words of wisdom, your knowledge. And I hope I speak on behalf of SAC that we hope to get to see you again soon for another event. I'll be handing this over to Dr. Marianne Bueno for closing remarks.
Thank you. Yes, both of your words of wisdom and advice got me teary-eyed and choked up as well. Thinking about all of the young people in my life who could use to hear those words as well. So I'd like to thank both Sewa and Charlie for joining us. And I'd like to thank everybody in the audience for joining us today for this beautiful conversation. I think for me, at least, the bold in caps takeaway that I'm leaving with is to do the work to educate ourselves on issues that are important to all of our communities, and know that we cannot simply rely on the experts who are living these lives and these intersectional lives. So I encourage all of you to do the work, educate yourselves, so that we all can create a more positive and healthy world for everybody. Before we go, I do want to announce a few events that we have coming up. I dropped one in the chat. Our next Mi Gente Heritage Month event is on Wednesday, October 13th, the Language Revitalization and Justice event that Greg has organized. We also have coming up our last Mi Gente Heritage Month event, which is on Thursday, October 14th. There will be sugar skull making and wine bottle painting here on campus to prepare for Dia de los Muertos. I also want to share information for our next LGBTQ plus IA Two-Spirit History Month event. We are having a conversation with one of our, a new city council member here in town who has made history as the first openly gay Black elected official in Texas. And that event is Tuesday, October 19th. Thank you for dropping that in the chat, Dr. Ramos. I'm over here fumbling as if I haven't been on Zoom for a year and a half. I also want to make all of our SAC students in particular aware that we do have a scholarship contest as part of our LGBTQIA Two-Spirit Plus History Month. I'm dropping that link in the chat. There are awards. Yay, we have 3 scholarships, $500 each, for anybody who addresses the prompt either in written form or any creative form. It could be a TikTok video. You can watch one of Charlie's Instagram or TikTok videos and be inspired. But there are 3 scholarships, SAC students, just for you. So please, please, I hate to say this, but I will say this. Historically, we do not get a lot of entries for these contests, scholarship contests. So that means that you have a very, very, very high, good chance of being awarded one of these scholarships. So I think I have made all of the announcements I was tasked to make. Please look at our calendar of events for LGBTQ plus IA History Month. Also, yes, if you want to join San Antonio College's Gender and Sexuality Association, Dr. Seraphine has dropped the Google form for you to become a member, to fill out and become a member. Okay, wow, what an event. I'm so excited. I have to say, this is probably the best Monday morning and into the afternoon I have spent all academic year. This was such a great event, and I love spending time listening to both Sewa and Charlie. And please come back for our next Mi Gente Heritage Month events and LGBTQIA Spirit to Spirit Plus History Month events. Have a beautiful afternoon and stay safe out there. Ciao.
Bye, thank you so much.
I wonder how many viewers were are at the BS room.
Hi, Charlie. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for joining us, Sewa. Thank you, interpreters. We love having you with us all the time.
Before Steph leaves, thank you for being backup and helping out. I'll be sure to write in your volunteer hours when I get the chance today.
Looks like we have a lot of SAC folk who are hanging out. You want to chat? You've got something to share?
Yeah. I'm just hanging out.
I was trying to get Joseph to unmute so he could possibly tell us the numbers, but
he can't.
Sorry, I was just trying to get.
Oh, that's right. I'm trying to get the Fiesta room, but is that Joseph too? Never mind.
Hey, Dr. Ramos, can I get your bio when you get a second?
Sure.
That's all I was hanging out for, just to remind you. Great job, you guys. This was wonderful. This was awesome. I think the person that had asked a while back, I can't remember who asked about two spirits and how come they didn't know about it. I don't remember who it was, but I'm hoping they were here because that's exactly the question they were asking is how come I've never heard of two spirits? So thank y'all for bringing this to campus. I think this was very, very well done. Thank y'all.
Great job.
Yeah, and great job, Greg, for facilitating the conversation. Thank you so much.
Yeah, Greg, you were a great facilitator, very calm and unobtrusive, but still managed to steer the whole thing. Masterclass.
Thank you. I was so nervous about this event because Charlie is like really popular in Indian country, and just being involved in this event, I was like, this is huge. This is like nothing I've never done before. My sister is viewing from the other room, and she's also like a huge fan. She's like, I didn't know you were doing this. So we're all just like, I'm still like freaking out. Like, I can't believe I was in the event with Charlie.
Yep, Charlie's definitely a superstar on the IG.
I wish I'd known Charlie 20 years ago, and I wish Charlie had been in my, I forgot what we called it then, American Indian History class I took in 2000, because everyone in that room needed to hear what Charlie was saying, including the professor, Daniel Richter, although he was mostly good, but ooh, just the stuff they would say about Indigenous people.
Perpetuating the violence, huh?
Well, okay, so what really got me was when Charlie was saying, well, why do you want to study Indigenous